Virginia Hall was not supposed to become a spy. She was not trained for war, not born into power, and not raised to defy empires. She walked with a prosthetic leg, carried constant pain, and lived in a world that believed people like her were weak. Yet, during the Second World War, the German Gestapo called her the most dangerous Allied spy in France. They hunted her relentlessly, posted her description across occupied territory, and failed to catch her. Her story is one of intelligence, endurance, deception, and quiet defiance. It is the story of a woman who turned her disability into invisibility and used her mind as her greatest weapon. Virginia Hall was born in 1906 in Baltimore, Maryland, into a wealthy but traditional family. From a young age, she was independent, determined, and deeply curious about the world beyond her immediate surroundings. She studied languages, traveled through Europe, and dreamed of a career in diplomacy. Her ambition was clear. She wanted to work for the United States Foreign Service and represent her country abroad. But in 1933, while serving as a clerk at the American Embassy in Turkey, her life changed forever. During a hunting accident, Virginia accidentally shot herself in the leg. Infection set in quickly, and despite medical efforts, doctors were forced to amputate her lower left leg. She was fitted with a wooden prosthetic limb, which she later named Cuthbert. The injury was devastating, both physically and emotionally. At the time, disability was seen as a permanent limitation, especially for government service. When Virginia applied to join the Foreign Service again, she was rejected. Her prosthetic leg disqualified her. This rejection defined the next chapter of her life. Rather than accept the limits imposed on her, Virginia became more determined to serve in a meaningful way. When war erupted in Europe, she saw an opportunity. In 1940, after France fell to Nazi Germany, Virginia volunteered for the British Special Operations Executive, a secret organization tasked with espionage, sabotage, and resistance support behind enemy lines. The SOE was desperate for operatives who spoke fluent French and could blend into civilian life. Virginia met those requirements and more. Despite initial hesitation about her disability, British intelligence recognized her intelligence, discipline, and mental resilience. She was trained in covert communication, encryption, surveillance, and sabotage. She learned how to resist interrogation, how to vanish in plain sight, and how to survive alone in hostile territory. In 1941, Virginia Hall was sent into occupied France. She entered under the cover of a journalist. For the New York Post, her mission was to build resistance networks, gather intelligence, and coordinate escape routes for downed Allied pilots and captured agents. From the beginning, Virginia understood the importance of appearing ordinary. She dressed plainly, walked carefully to avoid drawing attention to her prosthetic leg, and memorized the rhythms of everyday life under occupation. She moved through towns and villages, making contacts, establishing trust, and slowly weaving together a network of informants, couriers, and safe houses. She used coded messages, invisible ink, and radio transmissions to communicate with London. Her work required constant movement. Staying in one place too long meant death. Virginia quickly proved herself to be exceptionally effective. She coordinated jailbreaks, arranged supply drops, and provided intelligence that directly aided Allied operations. Resistance fighters trusted her because she listened, because she respected their risks, and because she never asked them to do anything she would not do herself. But her success did not go unnoticed. German intelligence began to track an unknown Allied agent operating across southern France. Reports described a woman with a limp, extremely cautious, highly skilled, and impossible to catch. The Gestapo launched an intensive manhunt. Posters were distributed describing her appearance. Orders were issued to capture her alive. She was labeled as the most dangerous Allied agent in France. For Virginia, the danger became constant. She narrowly avoided capture multiple times. Once, she escaped a raid by hiding in a haystack. Another time, she slipped past German patrols by blending into a group of peasant women. Her prosthetic leg, once seen as a weakness, became an advantage. It explained her limp, made her less suspicious, and allowed her to pass as harmless. In late 1942, the situation became untenable. The Gestapo was closing in. Several members of her network had been arrested. Virginia knew it was only a matter of time before they found her. She received orders to evacuate. The escape was brutal. She crossed the Pyrenees Mountains on foot in winter, walking for days through snow and ice with her prosthetic leg. The journey nearly killed her. When she reached Spain, exhausted and injured, she was arrested by Spanish authorities and imprisoned, briefly, before being released. Back in Britain, Virginia expected to be sidelined. Instead, she insisted on returning to the field. This time, she joined the American Office of Strategic Services. The Oz, the precursor to the CIA, despite skepticism from male colleagues and bureaucratic resistance. She was deployed again to France in 1944, just before the D-Day invasion. This time, she entered disguised as an elderly French farm woman. She dyed her hair, altered her posture, and adopted a rural accent. No one recognized her. Once inside, she resumed her work immediately. She organized resistance groups, coordinated sabotage of German supply lines, and prepared local fighters to support the Allied invasion. She directed attacks on bridges, railways, and communication hubs, significantly disrupting German troop movements. Throughout this period, Virginia operated under constant threat. The Gestapo was still hunting her. Unaware that she had returned under a new identity, she transmitted intelligence to Allied forces that helped guide bombing campaigns and ground operations. Her work saved countless lives by weakening German defenses ahead of advancing troops. When the Allies liberated France, Virginia Hall did not seek recognition. She quietly returned to the United States. For her service, she was awarded the Distinguished Service Cross, one of the highest military honors. She received it privately, as she preferred, without ceremony. After the war, Virginia joined the newly formed CIA. She continued to serve her country during the early years of the Cold War, working in intelligence analysis and operations. Despite her experience and achievements, she faced discrimination. Her disability and her gender limited her advancement. She accepted this without complaint, focusing on the work rather than the recognition. Virginia Hall retired quietly in 1966. She lived modestly, rarely speaking about her wartime experiences. Many of her missions remained classified for decades. Only later did historians begin to fully understand the scope of her contributions. Her story challenges traditional ideas of heroism. She was not physically imposing. She did not command armies. She operated alone, relying on patience, intellect, and moral courage. She succeeded because she understood people, because she could adapt, and because she refused to accept the limitations imposed on her. The Gestapo hunted her because she was effective. They feared her because she disrupted their control. They never caught her. Virginia Hall died in 1982, largely unknown to the public. Today, she is recognized as one of the most successful spies of the Second World War. Her life demonstrates that strength does not come from physical perfection, but from resilience, discipline, and conviction. She proved that intelligence and courage can overcome fear, prejudice, and even the most powerful enemies. Her legacy endures as a reminder that history is often shaped by those who operate in the shadows, unseen but indispensable. Virginia Hall walked through occupied Europe with a prosthetic leg and an unbreakable will, and in doing so, she changed the course of the war. Hall was already considered one of the most dangerous Allied agents in Europe. By 1942, the Gestapo had given her a nickname that spread quietly through occupied France. They called her the Limping Lady. They knew she was intelligent, disciplined, and impossible to predict. What they did not know was how close she often was hiding, right under their control. Despite her prosthetic leg, Virginia Hall continued to travel constantly. She moved between cities, villages, and rural safe houses, building networks of resistance fighters, couriers, and radio operators. She organized supply drops, trained civilians, and sabotage and coordinated escape routes for downed Allied pilots. Every movement carried the risk of arrest, torture, or execution. In late 1942, the situation became far more dangerous. German security forces intensified their hunt for resistance leaders. Informants were everywhere. Radio transmissions were traced. Entire networks were dismantled overnight. Virginia Hall was now one of the Gestapo's highest priority targets. When the Germans occupied the previously unoccupied zone of France, her position became impossible. Escape was no longer optional, it was survival. To leave France, she chose the most dangerous route possible: the Pyrenees Mountains. In winter, with a wooden leg, the journey took days. Snow, ice, exhaustion, and pain pushed her body beyond its limits. Guides warned her that even able-bodied men often died attempting the crossing, but Virginia Hall refused to turn back. She later described her prosthetic leg encoded messages as a problem that slowed her down. British handlers misunderstood and suggested she get rid of it. She replied calmly that the leg was not negotiable. She made it across! Once in Spain, she was arrested by authorities and imprisoned briefly before being released. From there, she returned to Britain. Many assumed her career in the field was over. They were wrong. In 1944, Virginia Hall returned to France once again. This time under a new identity. She changed her appearance, dyed her hair, altered her behavior, and disguised her limp. She posed as a simple, rural woman selling goods and tending animals. Few suspected that she was coordinating large-scale resistance operations. Behind the scenes, as the Allied invasion approached, her role became even more critical. She helped organize sabotage campaigns, targeting railways, bridges, and communication lines. These actions slowed German troop movements and disrupted reinforcements during the D-Day landings. Entire regions became ungovernable for the occupiers. German reports from the period show growing frustration. Weapons disappeared. Trains derailed. Roads were blocked. Resistance fighters seemed to appear and vanish without warning. At the center of many of these operations was Virginia Hall. By the end of the war, she had helped arm, train, and organize thousands of resistance members. She had contributed directly to the success of Allied operations in France. Yet she avoided publicity and recognition. After the war, Virginia Hall received multiple honors. The United States awarded her the Distinguished Service Cross, one of its highest military decorations. She was the only civilian woman in World War II to receive it. She accepted the medal quietly and refused public ceremonies. She later joined the newly formed Central Intelligence Agency. There, she continued to serve in intelligence work during the early Cold War. Despite her experience and proven record, she often faced discrimination. Her superiors underestimated her. Some questioned her physical condition. Others ignored her advice. Still, she worked on. Virginia Hall retired from intelligence work in the 1960s. She lived a quiet life, avoiding attention and interviews. Many of her achievements remained classified for decades. Only years later did historians begin to uncover the full extent of her impact. She had operated longer in the field than almost any other Allied agent. She had survived conditions that killed many of her peers. She had outwitted one of the most ruthless security apparatuses in history while carrying a disability that should have ended her career before it began. Virginia Hall died in 1982. She did not seek fame. She did not tell her story. But the records remain, and they reveal a woman who changed the course of war, not with force, but with intelligence, persistence, and absolute courage. She was hunted by the Gestapo. She crossed mountains with a wooden leg. She returned when others stayed home, and for years her enemies never caught her. After the liberation of France, many resistance members began to speak about the people who had helped them survive. Again and again, the same name appeared in reports, interviews, and declassified documents: Virginia Hall. Yet outside intelligence circles, almost no one recognized it. This was not an accident. Virginia Hall deliberately avoided attention. She believed that secrecy was a form of protection, not only during war, but after it as well. Many of the people she worked with were still alive. Some were still vulnerable. Silence was part of the job. Inside intelligence agencies, however, her reputation was legendary. British and American officers described her as one of the most effective field operatives of the entire war. She required little supervision. She made independent decisions. She adapted quickly when plans collapsed. Most importantly, she survived. Survival was never guaranteed. During her time in occupied France, Virginia Hall lived under constant threat. Safe houses were compromised without warning. Radio operators vanished. Entire networks collapsed in a single night. Each time she had to rebuild from fragments, trusting new people while suspect and betrayal from old ones. The psychological pressure was relentless. She learned to recognize danger in small details. A door left open when it should be closed. A shopkeeper who asked too many questions. A familiar street that suddenly felt wrong. Often these instincts saved her life. The Gestapo never stopped looking. German intelligence circulated detailed descriptions of her appearance, methods, and behavior. They knew she was American. They knew she was intelligent. They knew she limped. What they could never determine was where she would appear next.